Hello and welcome to week 4. So today I'm going to go through the rubric for the upcoming assignment, and then we're going to go across to the tutorial 4, and go through that together. All right, so let's go straight across to share screen and we'll discuss the rubric first. Okay, here we are. All right, so I'm just going to quickly go through the criteria. You can have a good read later, but I just want to kind of pick up some points here. All right, so firstly, explain how syllabus is planned and implemented for a group of EALD learners. So we're thinking about the syllabus. What planning goes into that syllabus? What do you need to think about when you're planning it? What's your aim for the lesson? Okay, and then how do we implement it then in the classroom? Okay, and with a focus, of course, on EALD learners. So we're going to be using the case study we've chosen. So you've got 3 case studies. You've chosen one of the case studies. Don't make it very general. You need to make it specific to that case study. All right, so whichever one you're using. Think about the unique challenges, the benefits, the plus side of that group, what you can use, what you can do there. All right, so using the case study and supported by contemporary EALD documents. So make sure that you're using good source material, contemporary source material, and so on. Okay, so this is insightful justification. I want to hear your insights, okay? Not just the source material. Bring in the good source material, yes, but then synthesize your thoughts, synthesize your insights, your interpretations. Okay, critically argue and support it with relevant literature, which demonstrates that you deeply understand syllabus design. Okay, that's a high distinction. All right, if you go down to pass, adequate but limited justification, supported by literature, demonstrating an adequate understanding of syllabus design for EALD learners, more descriptive than analytical. So you're just describing what different people are saying, but you're not really analysing it. That's actually a pass. And then we've got a fail on the other end of that. All right, so second criteria, workshop is effectively planned to demonstrate second language learning techniques. Okay, so again, we want your insights. How did you plan this workshop? What have you put in there? What are you demonstrating? What are you showing those teachers? What do you want them to take away from your workshop? Okay, so we're wanting them to learn some techniques that they can practically use in the classroom. Okay, second language learning techniques. So again, insightful identification and application of second language learning techniques creatively applied to chosen case study classroom. Which techniques will these teachers need in this particular school? We're not just talking in general, oh, this is a good one, this is a good technique, this is a good strategy. No, hone it down to that particular case study that you've chosen. All right, so everything's specific. Okay, those two criteria basically apply to the section on the implications for learning. All right, so make sure you kind of bring those out a bit more. These two are kind of the central hub of what you're wanting to present. Of course, we go to the next section. Okay, in the next section, you're just describing what theorists are saying. Description of an EALD learner, how children learn their first and second language based on research. Basically, that's just showing the research that you're putting into your assignment. You're bringing in research. You're not really interpreting anything. You're not really, you're just giving information there, basically. So what I'm going to be looking for, especially there's the first 2 sections, your insights, your interpretations. But we do want we want to see that you've got an extensive and sophisticated range of highly appropriate research literature. So you need to get the right literature, the right sources, insightfully and critically applied to EALD learners and learning. Okay, you might have some insights to throw in there. Okay, so let's move on. And the last section is only 10%. The other three are 30% each, but still important. Okay, so narrated PowerPoint meets task description, including appropriate wording for the task. Okay, I want you to be using academic language. I want you, if you're writing, write clearly and coherently, include correct grammar, punctuation, and spelling, and use, as I said, academic language. If you're speaking, you need to speak clearly and coherently, using the correct grammar. We won't see your punctuation and spelling, but we also, there's little pauses that come in there, you know, when you're speaking, so that it's understandable. It's not, you're not just rushing through it. Okay, so just be aware of the conventions of speaking as well, so you're understandable and you're putting the message across well. Okay, when you create your reference list, you've got an accurate APA 6th and 6th onwards. So 6th, 7th onwards from that, nothing under 6th, of course. So it should be accurate. It should be, you know how to put a reference list together. Don't lose marks for things like things being out of alphabetical order, you know, that kind of thing. So make sure that your reference list and your referencing in text citation is all done correctly. So all of that is for the last 10%, which could make or break you. You never know. All right. So if you have any questions on that, please feel free to ask. But I'm just going to stop share now. And we're going to share the okay, so let's go now to the tutorial. So this week we're looking at techniques for teaching speaking. So over the next this week and next week we'll be looking at speaking for EALD learners, the teacher's role and the Dialogic Classroom. Okay, so a lot to cover today. And next week, as I said, speaking, and following that, we're going to be looking at the other 3 skills, reading, writing, and listening. So we're going to be looking at different techniques. So technique being a key word, things that you can apply in your first assignment. All right, so I'm going to now ask the students to go and watch the video clips for this week, and then they're going to come back and they're going to discuss them together. So let's go now.
Like they said in that second video.
Yes, yep.
And as they said, not as much text in things. Like if you can really simplify it for them, makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely visuals. I mean, there's so many sound kind of things, and we're also, as I said before, we're also thinking about multiple styles of learning as well, because some people are audio learners and some people are visual learners. So we're kind of trying to reach everybody, and you know, with the message abundancy as well. That's a real clue, real key. Sorry. All right, so let's have a look. I'm just going to share with the questions. So let's have a look at the questions. Okay, so the first teacher. So how do you think she promotes dialogue? What kind of strategies did that teacher use with that class?
Our group said questioning.
Yeah. So trying to elicit information from them.
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of open-ended questions.
Yes, that's right.
She did repeat things several times so that they could, if they didn't catch it the first time, against making it a bit clearer. But I actually thought she spoke a bit too much, and I thought that if they crossed over with what the other lady was doing, and sort of while she was doing it, perhaps she could have shown them, you know, with pictures, visuals, or even using some of the children explaining, because she was doing comparative language, even to show, I guess, with somebody measuring height of two children and saying, you know, such and such is small, but she is smaller and she's the smallest, and just sort of bringing out the language that way, trying to use some sort of visuals.
She was labouring there a little bit, and I felt like she wasn't really reaching them on the ear, you know, on the superlative, the idea of the superlative. That they were kind of just thinking, well, you're just adding EST, which, I mean, she was, but they're not really grasping what she wanted them to grasp at some point. There was a bit of labouring going on. Yeah, anybody else got some ideas there?
We discussed that it was helpful that she gave the sort of example using the words in a sentence and comparing what the meaning of both of those were as a whole sentence rather than the word alone.
Yeah.
But we thought that it would possibly have been helpful to give some other examples. Like
some other sentences, you think?
Or no, just like perhaps like tallest, taller. Rather than deep, perhaps it didn't, I mean, I'm unsure what else they were learning in the classroom, but it felt a strange choice.
Actually, the tall one would have been interesting. You could have actually brought 3 children out and said, who's the tallest? Actually done a demonstration. That would have been a great idea.
Relevant word.
Yeah, they can relate it to themselves rather than, you know, which hole is the deepest. But yeah, would have been a great idea. Somebody in the other tutorial group suggested just simply drawing 3 holes, you know, one's small, one's, you know, bigger, and one's the biggest.
I think she got hung up on the word deepest, though. She wanted them to learn that word. I think that was why she didn't use the other words, but it just made everything else seem a little bit strange.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I think you're right, because she kind of went into another meaning of deep, like the emotional meaning, like deep emotionally or something towards the end.
Can I just add one thing there? Sorry, I jumped in quite a bit.
Jump in.
Can I just add that we forget that, you know, we don't just have to teach in the classroom, we can teach outside as well. So if she was trying to get across deepest, they were young kids. They could have gone to a sand pit and dug holes and started with a hands-on thing.
Yeah, that would have been.
Yeah, through literature, like I was doing measurement today and we were talking about length and measuring, and Stuart Murphy, and it might help a lot of the students, is an author of a lot of books to do with math concepts. Doesn't matter what you're teaching, what stage, he's always got a book there to do. The one I read today was exactly that. It was called The Deepest Sandcastle or something like that. And they were digging. So it brings out the language. So I think starting things like that, instead of just doing it on the board and they're all sitting there watching, if you start things off with literature and use that as your hook, is always
What was it,
good.
Tina? What's his name?
Stuart Murphy. If you look up Stuart Murphy and you get to the right site, he lists all his books and what it is underneath that they're doing. It might be counting on, it might be addition, subtract. I did a subtraction one today and it was about an elevator. It was fantastic. They loved it. But that brings out the language itself, and then you can get them to retell you, like, whose hole was the deepest? Tell me in a sentence. Mario's hole was the deepest, or was it deeper than, or things like that. All hands-on activities.
Yeah, I love that, getting them out there and
outside.
Yeah. So they feel involved.
And they're not bored.
Gives them a reason to wriggle around a bit.
Yeah. Well, she seemed to be just talking at them rather than letting them respond in the way they wanted to.
Yeah.
She wanted
for a lot of them just go over their head as well. Like, you can say it. You think they're nodding and going, yeah, that's right, I've got all of that. But that's a hard concept, that superlative for such young kids, that unless they're actually doing something where they're using the language, to them it's going in. I mean, I can teach capital letters, full stops till the cows come home. They go and do their work. There's not one capital letter or full stop. So unless they're doing something hands-on for something like that, it just doesn't make sense to them.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's just my experience.
No, that's great. Fantastic. Throw it in. Love, it really enriches the whole discussion, hearing how it's put into practice and different ideas. All right, so how about the comprehensible input, second clip? Any thoughts on that?
That
So
was good. That was really good.
She had a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
And what did you like, and what did you do you observe anything about it? Did you gain anything from it? What strategies did you gain?
I thought it was really important that the reminder, I suppose, was made that while these things can all be exceptionally helpful as addition to text, for example, when you put too many together, it can be quite overwhelming for some students. Yeah, I thought that was a good reminder.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody else?
I think going back to the visuals again is a good thing. It helps reinforce what she's trying to get across to them, especially for the ones, because they won't all have the same level of language. Some may not interpret or understand as easy as some others. So if she's got some visual backup there or something, I think that helps as well. It was quite useful.
Yeah, definitely.
And I like the paraphrasing, that was the section on paraphrasing, where the child was reading, and then the other child paraphrased what was said.
Yeah, great exercise.
Yeah, and that would help also, like if you're doing research and things like that. If one person's reading it, then the other person says what they think they've said, and then they write down that, because then it's put it into their own words rather than what's actually written on the page.
Yeah. And
yeah.
it all
and they've got a better understanding of it then.
Yeah. Yeah. So Tom's saying, like the constructivist theory of learning analogy of the teacher input and student output. Okay. Can you explain that a bit more to us, Tom?
Yeah, sure.
For me.
I like, well, it was just, instead of the old method of the empty vessel theory of the teacher just telling the student, this is the fact and you have to remember it. It's more as it's in student based learning. The student kind of builds up their knowledge and figures it out themselves with the teacher input and help. So then the teacher's giving them information and the student gives output to the teacher, who can then, according to that output, adjust what they then tell the student to help their learning to hit the the zone of proximal development area.
Yeah.
Help tie it all together in my mind.
Okay, anything else anybody wants to add? Okay, I'm going to share screen to the PowerPoint. I'm going to just kind of quickly flick through some of the stuff we've done this week. Okay. Get rid of the tutorial notes. Much here. All right. Sorry, just a sec. I've lost my PowerPoint. 1 second. Just there. There we are. All right. Oops. Shared window is closed. Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we looked at the Dialogic Classroom. We talked about teacher talk, comprehensible input and output. We looked at stretch language, the teacher's role in stretching the students. We looked at message abundancy, and we're going to look at a little bit of tenor. We're going to look at different types of sentences, so declarative, interrogative, imperative, and offer. So we're going to have a look through those and look at some ambiguities and so on. So let's have a quick flick through here. So Dialogic Classroom. We've got the 6 principles of dialogic teaching, which are really essential. That comes up again. Avoiding IRE. Okay, sometimes we may need to use it, but mostly we try and get the students to speak as much as possible. Teacher-guided reporting. So we had a look at that, scaffolding the student, clarifying, questioning, providing models, responding to the meaning of the student rather than what, is not getting the exact words right. Okay, allow student plenty of time to say what they need to say. Then we talked about classroom talk. And we talked about comprehensible input and output. We had the link there that you guys have just looked at. We said that comprehensible input is not the same as simplified input. What do we mean by that? Anybody?
It doesn't lower the sort of complexity of the idea.
Yeah.
It sort of fleshes it out in a way to access the complexity of it rather than making it easier to access. Like an easier concept, therefore making access easier.
Well said.
It gives the student the tools to access it.
Yeah, so we've still got the complex concept, as you said, but maybe we're saying it in different ways, and we've got the next line, maybe trying to bring it in different languages. I'm looking at different ways to present it. We're not actually compromising what we want to say. Comprehensible input, lots of visuals, and other things. Okay. Comprehensible input is language that can be understood. Okay, we looked at that. Comprehensible output, extended talk by students. How does the learner achieve comprehensible output? We looked at the stretch zone. So we've got the comfort zone. It kind of reminds me of the diagram with the high input, high support classroom and all the others. And we've got the comfort zone on the bottom where the input is not so challenging. So stretch language in the learners. Why message abundancy? We talked about message abundancy, and we talked about students' prior knowledge, shared knowledge that they might have, how to scaffold the new information being inputted. We talked about how sometimes with EALD students, it may not just be about language, it may be about whole concept. So we need to maybe slow down, actually presenting concepts so we don't end up with an information backlog, and message abundancy will help stop that. Okay, we talked about an example of message abundancy. So we've got, this comes from Gibbons. So this is a car GPS providing information several different ways. So we've got the visual information, the highlighting, use of colour, spoken language, and they repeat the key information. So if you're in a car and you've got your GPS on, then it'll keep repeating, it's going to say it at 5 kilometres away, it's going to say it at 2 kilometres away, and so on. I thought that was a really good example. Okay, so here's an example of message abundancy. So she's holding a globe in her hand. The day before, she's taught them word turns, the world turns. She's got that written up on the board, and then they've learnt the new word rotates. She mentions that scientists need to use special language sometimes. Okay. So this is a nice quote, inspiring quote. In a study on the effects of rich teacher-student talk in early learning situations, researchers found robust relations between early classroom support for language and later language and reading ability. So we're really building them up for life when we, we're able to impart and really have rich discussions with them, have rich conversations with them, and be able to kind of build up language from an early stage. so that they're going to go through their school years with that foundation there. Right, so we're going to go on to tenor. Okay, so we've had a look at field. Now we're going to start looking at tenor. So we're looking at interacting. We're looking at interpersonal language. So tenor is actually the context, and the interpersonal meta function, as we've talked about with Halliday. So this is one of his major meta functions, and so the tenor is the concept, and then we've got the interpersonal language and so on that goes on inside that. So as previously discussed, Halliday observes that during language development, the child uses language to perform seven microfunctions. We talked about this, just reviewing that. They're going to go through the developmental stages. In the first stage, that first few years, couple of years, they're going through, they're learning language so that they can perform those 4 early microfunctions, and then the other 3 come later. The other 3 about the environment, the first 4 about needs and so on. But these eventually get absorbed into the 3 metafunctions of language that will be used by the mature native tongue. We've got ideational language, which is in the field context. It's about ideas. We need to express our ideas. So we're looking at processes and participants. Then we go on to interpersonal language, which we're going to be looking at for the next few weeks. So this week and the next couple of weeks till the end of Module 2. So interpersonal language in a context. And then later we'll be looking at textual language, which is really interesting. So written like and spoken like. Okay, so metafunctions review carried on. So the field aspect is the subject matter. It's about expressing ideas, the ideational. The tenor aspect is about interacting with others, the interpersonal metafunction. Finally, the mode is about the text structure, textual metafunction. You can see in this diagram, okay, what's connected with what, and the social purpose being the kind of overarching theme of it all. But what is the social purpose? We have to think about these 3 areas. So tenor influences language choices when we are trying to foster social interaction. We're making friends, when we're presenting ourselves and they're presenting themselves, and there's interaction going on, and what kind of language is being used there. Then creating and maintaining relationships. Okay, so we're moving on to social interaction, to creating and maintaining relationships. How do we speak to someone that we're trying to kind of create and maintain a relationship with? Then we talk. It's also when we're developing and projecting our own personal identity. So who am I in this situation? Who am I wearing this hat? Who am I to this person? Okay, so a personal identity, and everything comes through language. Okay, I know we look at somebody and we can sum them up in 90 seconds by their body language. Then after that, everything's coming through language. If the person's silent, we're not kind of really getting to know them. And then expressing opinions and engaging with the views of others. Okay, so we're expressing our opinions. We're saying whether we agree or disagree with somebody. How do we say that? No, that's totally wrong. Or is there another way to say it? Okay, how are we maintaining our other goals of developing a relationship with that person, yet maybe disagreeing with them on something? Okay, so all of these kinds of subtleties come in with tenor and language choices. Okay, so we're going to have a look at patterns of interaction, the kinds of relationships we have. Okay, oops. I've got this little window thing, it's driving me nuts. Okay, so an important part of context of language is the relationship and roles people play. So everywhere we go, whether we like it or not, we all play roles. We play different roles with different people. And this often affects sentence structure and vocabulary used. So if we think about a teacher, what kinds of roles does a teacher take on? So one day there might be an expert. One day the class might be complete, know nothing about the topic at all, and you've got to go from the ground up, and you might be the expert. Okay, you might be addressing an assembly and have something important to say. So there's the role of the expert there. Then there's the role of demonstrator. You're going to model language for them. You're going to maybe do an experiment. So that's your role that day. Facilitator, they're doing something, you're facilitating, you're helping them. Mentor, okay, maybe one-on-one with somebody, helping them with their writing or whatever. Or disciplinarian. Okay, so lots of different roles. I'm sure there's many more. Right, then there's the student's role. So student may be a novice. The student may come in knowing absolutely nothing about it. The student may come in with no English. Okay, so the student may be a novice, okay, coming in. The student may be an explorer, looking at the globe, looking at the books, looking at the visuals. Okay, so they might be an explorer, building up the field, getting to know something. They might, and after that, they might become a knower. So they're going to know something. They'll be able to tell their buddy some information that the buddy doesn't know. So they might be a knower. Or they might be a subverter. They might be throwing things across the room when you're trying to pass things on to them. Okay, and who is the teacher communicating with? Is the teacher communicating with the whole class, another teacher, student, or a peer? All right, so all these are going to affect our role, our identity in that situation. And the kind of relationship, is it a supportive relationship? Are you talking to another teacher who's really supportive? Or maybe you've been paired up with another teacher and they're kind of cool, they make you feel stressed. Okay, so all different patterns of interaction. Okay, so these can all, this is part of, so formality register. That was, this is from the work of a linguist named Quirk in 1985. And Quirk saw these kinds of roles as more attitude rather than style or register. A lot of other linguists use the term style or register. He talked about attitude. Okay, so let's have a look at those degrees of formality. So we've got very formal, we've got frozen, rigid, language never changes, such as wedding vows, Miranda rights, that when they read you your rights, okay, that language doesn't change. It's got to be worded a certain way. So that is the ultimate formality, where you've got something that can't change and you've got to learn it word for word. Then we go into formal. So here we're talking about standard English. We're talking about giving a speech. We're talking about school lessons. Okay, delivering information, giving a TED talk, something like that. So we've got formal standard English. We've got neutral, which is also called consultative. It's less formal, but it's still standard Australian English. Okay, then we move into informal. So maybe a newscaster, employee to employer, many others. Okay, so in countries like, say, Germany and Japan, they're going to never address their employer by the first name. It may have changed, but they are known not to call their employer by the first name. But in Australia, we're very informal. Workplace, we're going to call them Bob or whatever. Okay, and then we've got very informal. So we've got casual, even familiar. This is the kind of language between friends or family members. Okay, so we're going somewhere with this. This is kind of just building on something that we're going to talk about in a moment. Okay, so Quirk's levels of formality. Okay, here's formality scale examples. So very formal or frozen might be a sign in the library, or maybe something that the librarian says to a lot of different people. Silence is observed in the library at all times. Okay, so we're not mentioning any participants. I guess silence could be a participant. We're not mentioning any human participants here. We're using a passive verb, is observed, which is quite kind of abstract and formal. and then the remainder of the sentence. Silence is observed in the library at all times. You can see it's quite cool. It's quite objective. Okay, then we've got formal. Kindly keep quiet, Miss Fittich. Okay, so we're addressing her as Miss Fittich. Kindly keep quiet. Okay, it's very basic. Neutral consultative. You might talk to somebody at the same desk, somebody in your class group or something. A student might talk to somebody in their class group. Say you're not allowed to talk in the library. And we've got informal, casual, hush, Jane, and very informal, intimate, shh, darling. Okay, so this is all from the work of Jews. Okay, so looking at the different levels of formality there. Notice in under neutral consultative, we're bringing in the pronoun you. Okay, you are not allowed to talk. So that's becoming less formal. Okay, so talking a little bit about ambiguity. So without context, utterances can be ambiguous. For example, this sentence, you're not leaving, is it a statement, order, or question? Anybody jump in?
Statement.
I'd say order.
Okay, I'm going to, anybody else? Right, I'm going to say it with different intonation. So we're going to add a bit of context to it. You're not leaving. What about that one?
Order.
Order.
Yeah. Okay. You're not leaving.
Question.
Listen again. Not leaving.
If you raise the inflection, you're asking a question. If you lower it, you're making a statement. And if there's a question mark, if it's written, it's obviously a question.
Very good. Okay, yeah. So if I say, you're not leaving, you're not leaving. It's like I'm making a statement. I'm making an observation. Okay, but if I say, you're not leaving, see how that changes it? You're not leaving. It's kind of like everybody else is leaving, you're not leaving. I thought you were going with them. Okay, so out of context, you're not leaving could mean a lot of different things. So discourses are formed by a sequence of utterances, and it's obvious that many utterances taken by themselves are ambiguous. They can become clear only in a discourse. Okay, so we're looking at how context adds. So even intonation is part of context. Okay, let's move on. Meaning without context, continued. He says, would you like some coffee? He says, coffee would keep me awake. Does B want coffee or not?
No.
Okay, so anybody think anything else?
It's kind of hard to tell without being there because he might want it to keep him awake or he might not. It depends what time it is, I guess.
Exactly. So he might be going off to night shift and he's thinking, I'm feeling really tired tonight. So there's this kind of shared knowledge around this that we don't know. So A would know, and B is assuming that A knows the context. Us just looking at that conversation, we're not going to be able to really fully know what that means without context. The utterances have, yeah?
Sorry, Deanne. Are you saying that, like, I feel like if you saw the first question, would you like some coffee, and B was the response, if they wanted some and they were going on night shift, wouldn't they just say yes? Do you know what I mean?
They might. I mean, there's many different ways. Yeah.
It could have to do with
so.
the intonation, though. It's the intonation in it that tells you what it's doing.
It just sounds like a verbalized consideration.
A verbalized consideration, I like that. There's many different ways. I mean, they could just say yes. Oh, no, thanks. Okay, but they're actually saying, oh, coffee would keep me awake. Oh, coffee would keep me awake. Who said that about the intonation?
Me, Diane.
Yeah, Diane. Yeah, intonation really tells us a lot. In this case as well, we don't know whether he or she wants to be kept awake or doesn't want to be kept awake. So we really need more information. We need more context around that. Okay, so utterances have not only explicit content, but also implicit. That's implicit meaning in this statement. We don't know, okay? What are the variables that affect the meaning of this statement? Well, as we've just discussed, does B actually want to be kept awake? How do you think an EALD learner would interpret ambiguity like this? We find it a little confusing. But there's probably quite a lot of ambiguity in everyday speech. If you're sitting in a lunchroom, you're in a workplace, you're sitting in the lunchroom and you're still kind of learning conversational English and there's a lot of chat going on. There's a lot of things that you're not going to pick up, a lot of nuances, a lot of shared knowledge, and it can be quite ambiguous. Okay, and the same in the playground. Right, so we're going to have a look at speech functions. So speech is made up of a number of functions which have certain recognizable structures. So we can look at that structure and immediately know, hey, that's a question. These structures are employed when using language for various purposes. We can ask for information, so question or interrogative. We can provide information, statement or declarative. We can ask someone to do something for us or give us something, command or imperative, or offer to do something or provide something, so offer. Okay, so let's build on that a little bit. Let's look at the structure of that. So there's our classic structure of a declarative statement. Old woman who lived in a shoe. I've made a mistake here. It's not really an auxiliary when it's on its own. It's a main verb. But had can be an auxiliary. We can say had fed, and then had becomes an auxiliary. But the auxiliary goes here. Okay, we would put the main verb in the next column. So the old woman who lived in a shoe had so many children. Okay, just let here in. Okay, in a question, as we know, interrogative, the auxiliary comes in front of the subject. Should I call them? What have they done? Question. Okay, yes, no question and a WH question. And then we've got the structure of commands. So we've got come inside, positive, or don't take photos here, negative. A special form takes let's at the beginning, let's go inside, or let's not take photos here. Right, so, and we didn't put up the structure of offers, but offers take various forms, such as, I'll carry that for you, statement like, here, let me carry that, imperative like, would you like me to carry that, question like. But what is the function? Does the function change? How would the identity of the two people in this interchange giving an offer affect the way the offer is worded? Who do you think the two participants might be in these three examples? I'm just going to add this little note in there real quick so we don't forget. So English learners may have difficulty with creating negatives. So some possibilities include we no go, we not go, not go. Okay, so just keep in mind that negatives could be an issue. Let's go back to our question. How would the identity of the two people in this interchange giving an offer affect the way the offer is worded? Who do you think the two participants might be in the three examples? Anyone?
What are we looking at? The offers?
Yeah, let's look at them. So first one, I'll carry that for you. So statement like, who do you think identity of the person that's carrying, the person that's offering the other person? What kind of identity, what kind of roles?
Like what kind of relationship they have?
Yeah, you could say that.
I presume
Like a friend that offers to carry stuff
know
for
one
you.
another.
Sorry, what was that?
I would say that they would know one another. I feel like you wouldn't be so presumptuous as to say, I will carry that for you.
Yes, it's quite direct, isn't it? So we probably wouldn't go up to, you know, somebody, the dean of the university or whatever, and say, I'll carry that for you. What about, somebody else? All right, let's look at the second one. Yeah, let me carry that. What about that one? Is it different to the first one?
It sounds like whoever said that has seen someone struggling and is like, oh, let me help you.
That sounds kind of empathetic, would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So let me carry that. Let's look at the last one. Would you like me to carry that?
It's a bit less direct and you're giving them an option to say no. Whereas
Exactly. Yeah, so it's less direct. Keywords there. So which one is the most formal out of the three?
First one.
Mm.
Well, listen, I'll carry that for you. Would you like me to carry that?
I would use the last one if you're speaking, like if I were thinking about speaking to a superior.
Yeah, so
I'd probably use the last one.
usually the rule of thumb is the least direct is the most formal. Okay, as you become more direct, you lose formality, you become more informal. Okay, move on. All right, so we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail. Oops. Let me just move that out of the way. Right. So the imperative is not considered polite in certain situations. Certain less direct forms are used. So the process is formed using what we call modal auxiliary verbs. So auxiliary verbs, does anybody remember what they are? Okay, so could, would, should, may, might, shall, can. Okay, all of those kinds of verbs, they've got a certain set of rules, they've got their own grammar. Okay, but we use them in conversation, and they're very much used in softening direct comment. Okay, so let's look at these. Could you open the door? Could you open the door for me, please? Would you mind opening the door for me, please? Can you open the door for me, please? Can I use your computer, please? Could I borrow some money from you, please? Do you mind if I turn up the heating? Would you mind if I turned up the heating? Okay, so looking at these, which of them sounds the most formal?
Would you mind? Well,
Would you mind?
there's two would you mind, isn't there? Would you mind opening the door for me, please?
Yeah, would you
But
mind opening the, yeah?
I would say the door is more formal than the heating, because the heating, the person asking the question is the one offering to do the task. So there, it's sort of I would consider that like a step into the realm of comfortability and sort of being, able to presume that it would be acceptable to do so if you're the one to do it. But I feel that may be a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's certainly an aspect. Would you mind opening? You're actually asking them to do something and kind of presuming that they're, that they might be interested in doing it. Would you mind if I turned up the heating? Yeah, it's really down to this phrase, would you mind? Okay, would you mind if, or would you mind doing? This phrase, would you mind? Yeah, you're right. It is the most formal, the most polite. I'll explain why in a moment. But what do you think is the next less formal?
Do you mind if I turn up the heat? Potentially.
Could be. Any other ideas?
Would it be, can I use your computer, please?
Which one would you use with a close friend? Would you say, could I borrow your computer for a moment? Or would you say, can I use your computer? Which one sounds more direct?
I feel like you could ask. You could
what
ask
was that one?
sibling. You could ask a sibling, like, "Can I use your computer, please?" Or someone.
Yeah,
Someone
sibling.
you're familiar with. Yeah.
What about, could I borrow some money from you, please? Where does that fit in the continuum? So we're starting with the most, most indirect. Would you mind if?
My understanding is that the can and do words are more about like if something's possible. Like, can I? Like you know when children ask, "Can I go to the toilet?" and you say, "Yeah, sure." I don't know, can you? Because you're asking them to say, "May I?"
Yeah, so that's a good
Similar
point.
to that. Like, I feel like can is quite, well, yeah, you can use it, but you haven't asked if I want you to. Like, if I choose that to be possible. Where if you say, could I use your computer? I think that gives the person, the answer to it is a little more if they would like that rather than if it's possible.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, could I sounds more like you're considering whether they would want to or not.
Yeah.
Rather than can I. Yeah. So can you, very direct. Could I, a little less direct. Do you mind if I, a little less direct. Would you mind if I, most direct? Would you agree? Or do you think we should shift something around?
Can I just quickly ask, where would may fit in that?
Right, so when someone was, I can't see all the names actually, I can't see all your faces, but somebody was talking about can I used for permission, whereas it's also used for ability. So you might say, can I become somebody? Sorry, just letting someone in. Can you ride a bike? Okay, so I'm asking about ability, but I can also use it to ask for permission. So that's with these modal auxiliaries. Some of them change meaning really change meaning depending on the context more than the other just ordinary auxiliaries and main verbs, ordinary noun groups, verb groups, sorry. So they really change around. They really change depending on the context. So yeah, it could be confusing. But I'll just explain to you. So this actually goes back to what we call hypothetical statements. So if I say to you, if I were a bird, I would fly, does that mean I'm going to fly? If I were a bird, I would fly. Am I going to just put up on the window and fly now?
No.
No. Okay, exactly. So I'm hypothesizing, I'm imagining. So if you take that meaning of it, something, I'm showing that you're imagining something, would you mind if we could translate it like this. I'm trying to imagine if you would possibly mind if I turned up the heating. So we're extending it out. We're hypothesizing about whether they would be willing to turn up the heating, for me to turn up the heating. Whereas can I, just like simple permission, it's very direct. Do you mind is more direct than would you mind, because would is very indirect. So these are the kinds of nuances and subtleties that we, that they need to learn in, interacting with one another, interacting in a group, and so on. Anybody, any questions or anything they want to say about that?
I'm going to say something, Deanne. It's Christy. So I've I'm going to say my partner is from Germany, and sometimes when I speak in a polite way, like, would you mind if I turn up the heating? It's just that that direct translation is not always understood correctly. So like it can confuse the meaning, if you know what I mean. So sometimes it's better.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it's just better to be really direct and less polite.
Well, some cultures value directness more than other cultures. So, for example, the British culture, okay, it's very polite, very, very, formal in certain situations, especially if I don't know the person very well. Whereas, maybe the German culture is more, I know that there's cultures that are really direct. And they're saying, why are you, using all these phrases and so on?
Yeah, I think, that's right. But I think sometimes the translation, when you're trying to be polite, ends up getting confused. And so that's why the directness is more appreciated by them. Do you know what I mean?
And again, it depends on, this is part of forming your identity. The language that you use forms your identity. So with this person is going to hate all that formal language and just say, to just be direct. And this person might feel quite offended. You're going, hey, can I turn up the heating? Like you'd come in with your sibling or your best friend and say, hey, can I turn up the heating? I'm freezing. Very direct. So once again, it depends on who you're talking to, and it's all about.
Yeah, definitely. But I guess my point is that if you did have an ELD learner, and they might not understand that politeness, so you'd have to sort of give them a bit more meaning or a bit more examples about it, because that they might understand the direct approach more than the sort of formal polite way.
So for example, could I borrow some money? Could I is really common in Australia, and it's the kind of thing you hear quite a lot.
I've had quite a different experience with people, my partner's from Sri Lanka, and his parents, the way that they've been taught is to speak English is a much more formalized way. Yes. I don't know. If you have something to add. And so perhaps if it's often the case that we get learners that have perhaps learnt some of their basic English either formally or informally in a different country, and sometimes their foundations may be in that more formal way because that's the norm in that place.
Well, I used to go into an office in Sydney and teach a Malaysian student. She was very, 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 a real kind of, the optimal lady, sort of thing. And she'd learned English in Malaysia, and she just refused to use contractions. So instead of saying can't, she insisted on saying cannot. And then she also found it difficult when Australians kind of use all these shortened forms and so on. So, it does make a huge difference. Absolutely. Different cultures have different ways of looking at things. And, I would say that the Sri Lankan, the Indian cultures, having been to India a couple of times, they surprisingly really do value.
English comes from a very colonial sort of background.
Exactly.
So I suppose that comes with that nature as well.
Yeah, and, if you look at the history of language, it's really fascinating.
If I may just jump in there, I'm Sri Lankan and I can vouch for that. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you a reason. I seriously couldn't. But for some reason, speaking English is like top tier for some reason. I don't know why, but it really is. Yeah.
Remember the first time I went to India, I was invited to the home of this Lieutenant Nalavu and his wife, and all the table was laid in beautiful white tablecloth and everything was sparkling, and they'd say, how is your mother and father? How's this? How's that? Like this polite banter that would go on, and it just kind of reminded me of that, that 1800s something in England or something. Yeah, it was kind of sweet. I liked it. But so interesting to be aware of that, and to kind of, rather than give me that, you might even a little less direct than give me that. Can I borrow, or could I borrow? It's kind of something worth knowing. All right, let's move on. Okay, so here we've got. I'm just going to. We've got a little dialogue. a conversation. So let's just look at the lead in first. So for Halliday, as we know, language is about function, and all language exists to fulfill communicative functions. Identify the following in terms of function, i.e., are they declarative, just statement, interrogative, question, imperative, go outside, or offer? What can you say about the participants' relationships? Would this conversation be worded differently, for example, if it occurred between virtual strangers at a sit-down dinner after a wedding or other formal engagement? Okay, let's look at the conversation. Where's Rebecca? Work. Again? Yep, again. She'll be missing dinner again tonight, I guess. Hey, could you pass the salt? Salt's no good for you. I'll pass it. Here you go. All right, now let's look at each of these utterances. Number one, where's Rebecca? What do you think this one is? Clarity.
Interrogative.
Interrogative. Yeah. What about the second one? Work.
Declarative.
Declarative. We're just giving information. Next one. Again.
Interrogative.
Again, interrogative. Yes. Yep. Again. She'll be missing dinner again tonight, I guess.
Is that declarative as well?
It is, yes. Number 5. Hey, could you pass the salt?
Is that interrogative?
You mean like a question?
Offer.
Yeah.
I mean, technically it's a question, but what's the function?
Declarative.
Have a good look about it. Think about it. What are they doing?
Kind of an inverse offer.
And let's look at what we've got again. Declarative, interrogative, imperative, or offer.
The imperative.
That's it. Imperative. Basically what she's saying is pass the salt. She's saying, hey, could you pass the salt? It's encased in a question. It's actually, the function is actually an imperative. Number 6, salt's no good for you.
Declarative.
Declarative.
Yeah. Declarative. I'll pass it.
Offer.
Offer. Here you go.
Offer.
Offer again. Well done. Yeah. So you can see that they're not always like that structure that we looked at. It's the function itself is not always in a recognizable structure. Okay, we have to look at the context. So we can look at this context and we can basically say what the functions are of each statement. Right, so just to kind of bring all this to a close, so younger learners should understand that language is used in common. Now, this is all from Gibbons, okay? I've just taken it straight out of Gibbons. This is what she's saying. Understand that language is used in combination with other means of communication. For example, facial expressions and gestures, and as we said, intonation. Okay, lots of different things. Where are they? What's the identities of the people? Okay, lots of other things. So facial expressions, gestures, and so on. Understand that there are different ways of asking for information, making offers, and giving commands, as we just looked. Learn the difference between the questions and statements, offers, and commands. So learning also to look in the context, starting to be kind of a bit more fluid. It's not just about the structure. Okay, and slightly older learners understand how age, status, expertise, and familiarity affect the ways which we interact with people and how these codes and conventions vary across cultures. Understand that successful cooperation with others depends on shared use of conventions like turn-taking patterns, forms of address that vary according to the degree of formality in social situations. In other words, being able to be aware of the different expectations, different degrees of formality, social situations. Okay, what kind of wording do we use? How do we structure? How do we put across that utterance? Okay, then we've got identify roles and collaborative patterns in students' own groups and pair work. For example, initiating a topic, changing a topic through negotiation, affirming other speakers, building on their comments, asking relevant questions, providing useful feedback, prompting and checking individual and group understanding. That's kind of a mouthful. But we're analysing. They're able to analyse their groups. They're able to analyse what's the identity, what's the role of that person. Are they more of an expert on this subject? Are they a knower? Okay, are they something else? Are they novice? Okay, do I need to kind of help them along a bit? What are the collaborative patterns in our pair work? Is anybody who is initiating the topics? Who initiates the most topics? Okay, who changes the topic through negotiation? Who is the person that affirms the other speakers and builds on their comments? So basically feeds that interaction, keeps it going. Asking relevant questions, providing useful feedback. Okay, who is really kind of understanding and checking and understanding, prompting, groups understanding. Okay, so this is what we're kind of moving towards in year 3. Okay, so I'm just going to stop share. Okay, so that's about all I've got to say for today. Does anybody have anything that they want to ask about anything at all that we've looked at tonight, or anything to do with the assignment? All good? Excellent. Right. So I'm going to just leave it there. So we'll finish a little bit early.
Sorry, just quickly.